Good evening and welcome. Now, I've been looking around the pro EU propaganda, and I believe the EU has got the best PR our taxes can buy. In fact, it's very brilliant. It's very impressive, I have to say. I've looked at Stephen Fry. Excuse me, I feel a bit nauseous speaking his name. I can't stand him. And telling you how marvellous the EU is, and other such, well, I won't say people, telling you how marvellous the EU. It's absolutely fantastic, and how marvellous. But it's a kind of consensus issue. And anything good, really, does it have to be sold? For example, I've got here a Loris watch, which is actually a brand of Seiko. Seiko is one of the best watches you can buy. And this is about 15 years old, this watch. And it's perfect timekeeper. I've never seen it advertised. And you won't see it advertised. I believe it's still in production because it is so good. This is what I use when I'm working around and etc. etc. This is a Casio F91W, which is one of the most common watches in the world, and it's still in production after 30 years because it is so successful. I've never seen it advertised. You don't have to advertise it. It speaks for itself. Now, there's something rather interesting because I believe the EU is communism, and the way they sold communism was, for example, when the Bolsheviks took power in Russia, people don't realize that it was only 7%, just 7%, and possibly less, of the people that supported them. When Mao took over in China in 1948, it was less than 1%. How did they do it? Well, they used PR and common consensus, fake consensus. And this is a quote from, excuse me, I am reading this, from Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the 8th leader of the former Soviet Union between 1988 and 1991. And he said, and I quote, "The EU is the old Soviet Union dressed in Western clothes." So what do you think of that, Caroline?
Well, I guess I've moved on from the EU because, in actual fact, the United Nations is in charge of the EU in the way that it seems to be in charge of most of the countries in the world. So, for example, this past 24 hours, I saw an article which basically said the UN could force countries to accept asylum seekers due to climate change. Now, so I mean, that's just now they're not beating about the bush anymore. They're not hiding behind the EU facade anymore. The EU is it's like a layer of an onion, and you peel the layers off, and you have these groups of people who are seemingly not answerable to anybody. And I just think that after hearing some cases this week about people not getting justice in our court system, I guess our court system is quite an integral part of the whole sort of jigsaw, if you like, of corruption. I mean,
Yes.
it was only reported in the news today that the UK has fallen down the pecking order, and it's now, is it the 12th most corrupt country in the world?
I heard it was the most corrupt country in the world.
It feels like that when you're living here.
It does. It does feel like that. But what gets me is the propaganda. For example, I know this is a bit sad, but the only time I listen to the radio, I don't have a television, but the only time I listen to the radio is in my car or first thing in the morning to listen to the weather forecast, and that's about it. And sometimes I leave it on. And this past week, the BBC local radio has been pushing this climate change. Well, I think it's a cult, and they've been really pushing it heavily. And I can pick up several local BBC radio programs, and I've found that the same people, I think, are phoning in different programs. For example, this morning it was what was it now? Are you prepared to be? When are you going to become a vegetarian so as to stop climate change and to lower your carbon footprint? And what did we have? We had a chap who's a builder that can't wait to get an electric car. That same builder was on another local BBC radio station and yet another local radio station. And then we had the elderly lady that's trying all she can to help Greta Thunberg. And then we had, I eat meat, I don't give a damn. I think it's a human right to eat meat. The thicko. And I think, I haven't got any evidence, but I've got a feeling it's trying to form a common consensus. And these people phoning in are from the secret services. And of course, who do they have spokespeople from? The Green Party.
Well, that reminds me. Well, that's like the EU, isn't it? When we joined the EEC, a couple of years on the run up to us moving in, it was a case of the vast majority of the people were not interested in joining, even as a trade bloc. But over a period of time, they had civil servants writing into the newspapers. And, we would be missing out if we didn't join. And it's just by stealth, it's mission creep. Yeah. So, I mean, we talk about, one of the reasons, there are lots of different reasons why people voted to leave the European Union. But one of the reasons for some people was to control immigration. Now, controlled immigration. Well, how does that work? Because what I've been reading in the papers this week, Boris Johnson is removing the £30,000 earnings threshold that is required for people who want to come into the UK from outside the EU. That's the current rate. Now, Boris Johnson, after Brexit, so Brexit, it's not really happening as what I see, what I expect
I agree with you.
to see. So Brexit Day just means that it's the 31st of January. So after the 31st of January, it is possible that the government will have new immigration rules produced. And if they won't have them produced by that date, they will certainly have them produced by the end of the year, because nothing really changes on the 31st of January. The transition period kicks in. So all that really happens is our existing members of the European Parliament no longer go off to Brussels. So everything else is as it is now, pretty much. So immigration, lifting the threshold, which seemed quite sensible at the time, which means now that people coming in, they could have the bankers supporting them, saying, yes, they're going to go into self-employment when they come here. And that would allow them just to walk straight into our country from anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And then that self-employment may or may not continue. Self-employment doesn't actually, the amount of money involved, they don't have to maybe earn, they're saying withdraw the income restriction. And basically the immigration policy is not going to be fit for purpose yet again. And this is undoubtedly done by design. This is now a country which is going to be full of people from all over the world. And we have people, indigenous people predominantly, now going to the pawn shops, the PAWN pawn stores, right, and taking in their prized jewelry, their family heirlooms, because they cannot pay the bills. Now, the people in power know this. They don't care. And we have this massive divide, universal credit, which is being rolled out, I believe, now into places like Hull. Universal credit is creating a more indebted society again. More and more people are going to the loan sharks who, they can be family friends, people who live on their estate, lending money to desperate people at extortionate rates of interest. They're not generally licensed. And of course, then if you don't pay the money back in time, you could be physically assaulted or even worse. And this is the society that we are living in today. So those people living in the ivory towers of Westminster, they quite frankly do not care about us. So when people think we've got a democracy, we're sending people as our representative to speak on our behalf in Parliament, that is a total fallacy.
Yes, you're spot on. I studied communism when I was from the age of about 14. I was very interested in the subject, and that was during the height of the Cold War. And I was looking back on what I used to read and that type of thing. And communism runs on two lines, and that is to keep people as stressed as humanly possible. So you have a fear going through the society all the time, and also break down the family unit because they want people to rely on government, not the family, which of course they've done. And above all, what they try and do is kind of that they'll put out two lies and get people to argue which lie is the truth. And all the time it's fake propaganda. Is it marvelous? Isn't it fantastic? Because you listen to the mainstream media, they make it look as if everybody's middle class and everybody's fantastic, doing very, very well when they're not. And the people that are the underdogs think, well, I'm a failure because I'm not like these top people. I should be like them. No, they're not failures. It's society that's made them like that. But immigration is the key to destroying a society. And that's what Russia did in the former Soviet Union, because they sent loads of Russian migrants into the satellite states, and then they outlawed the satellite states' culture and tried to destroy it. That's what Stalin did. So if you look back, there's an old saying, to look forward, you've got to keep one eye in the past. If you look back on the former Soviet Union of what happened, and people think, oh, he's on about Soviet Union again. Oh, blimey, he does go on a bit. Yes, I do. I know I do. I do waffle on a bit about it. But we are so close to that. We are terrifyingly close to it. And if you tell that to people, they go, oh, no.
Well, it's global communism. I mean, the thing is, you've got to understand, people have got to understand how PR system politics works. For example, it was last June, Sajid Javid, as Home Secretary, he what they do is they drop a pebble into the pond. So they testing public opinion. Sajid Javid had said June last year, we are thinking, or we may, or we could, or we should, or perhaps. Look at the way that language is written in newspapers. So he has just launched effectively an assault on the British people. And we've missed it. We've missed that little clue that they're supposed to give us. They're supposed to tell us what they're going to do to us in advance.
Yes.
So it's all very convoluted, but we did know it was on the mainstream press, but was overlooked. But, it's a very well-known and well-used phrase in politics. The devil is always in the detail. And that's what you've got to sort of think about. only a few weeks ago, Boris and Priti Patel were talking about increasing the number of university places. Well, do we want lots more people coming into the country who are studying anology? You know, as Maureen Lipman said, have you got anology? Well, that's good, isn't it? Well, is it? Is it because we've got enough people with ologies already in this country that can't find a job because they've got anology?
Yeah, but also they've got educated twits, because when you look at, again, I'm sorry about this, but I'm going back to the Soviet Union. How did these people, how did Mao and how did Stalin manage to get between, they don't know the full figure, but it's estimated between 60 million to 100 million people killed. It was a killing machine. And how did he get that reign of terror? How could he take people off the streets and send them to gulags where you had, and I advise people to look this up, but not before you eat your dinner, and that is look up Cannibal Island. Horrendous what happened in Siberia. And it was all run by educated twits. And what have we got today? Educated twits. You look at our media. We've got people such as Brian Cox. To me, is an educated twit. He's as thick as two short planks, in my view. You've got Chris Packham, who looks out of place in his discipline. We've got David Attenborough, who again looks out of place in his discipline. They don't look right in what their particular subjects are. But going back to what you said earlier, now I don't normally agree with Anne Widdecombe, what she says, but what she did say, and I agree with, was when the common market, as it was known, was first set up, it was a trading agreement between sovereign states that were going to keep sovereign states. And when Heath illegally took us into the common market in 1973, all the propaganda was, well, it's only a trading agreement. What have you got to worry about? We're still a sovereign state. We're only throwing water in the Commonwealth, the faces of the Commonwealth, such as Australia, New Zealand and Canada and South Africa. So what have you got to worry about? And then suddenly it became, or overnight, it became the EEC. And now it's the EU, all by stealth, all very careful, all very well planned. It's a con. And it's, again, going back to what Mikhail Gorbachev said, and I've got another quote of his. He said, where is it? I've lost him. No, sorry, it was, it's here somewhere. Yes, here it is. He said, the most puzzling development in politics during the last decade is the apparent determination of Western European leaders to recreate the Soviet Union in Western Europe. There it is. That's Mikhail Gorbachev. He should know, shouldn't he?
Well, at the end of the day, all these empires get built up, but all these empires eventually get destroyed.
They do.
And what's going to happen this time? Yeah, I was going to say, somebody's put, they have different opinions to David. They have the right opinions, unlike David Bellamy. And that's exactly it. If you are swimming against the tide, you're swimming in the opposite direction to the other fish, then Facebook, that I've been shadow banned for months now. And just overnight, 2 days ago, that shadow ban seems to have been lifted. I've had nothing officially sent to me. I didn't even know that I'd been shadow banned, but people are starting to see my posts again. If you start talking, put your head above the parapet, then this is what you can expect.
I've seen some very strange things. For example, there was a video that you did, what's it, on the 15th? I looked on your YouTube site, it was nowhere to be seen. And it must have gone on there for a little while because there was comments on there. And it came up on the 20th. I thought,
Oh, that was to leave or not to leave? That is the question.
That one disappeared and it came back again. But there's a very interesting comment from Eminem in the comments section. It says, I read the autobiography of
the Russian spy who was involved in the Christine Keeler scandal, and he said he advised the Conservatives to join the EU as it would weaken the unions. And of course, we always had that phrase, we want to have more immigration because to wipe the noses of the Conservatives in diversity. But at the end of the day, these phrases and people giving this advice is all very well and good, but actually, this has gone back literally decades and decades and decades. It's very difficult to actually put a date on when this was all formed. I mean, I was thinking today, well, I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, "Isn't America a strange country?" She said, because it is like, it's almost like a test bed, a test tube, if you like, for what's to come, because America has had mainly immigrants rather than an indigenous population of any great number. And it's true, isn't it? You've seen maybe the New World Order concentrated on America first.
Well, the thing is, we are all different, and I respect other cultures and other people. And if you say anything about stirring, mixing cultures and things like that, they say, "Oh, you're a racist, you're a Nazi." I bet you're what they. And there's another new term that's come in now that you've been radicalized. That's another one. But could you or I go over and become a Zulu? Or perhaps an Australian Aborigine? No, we can't. And I have the greatest respect for those people because they live in a very hostile, well, not all the Zulus, but most of them lived in a hostile environment, and they can survive in that. I'm not a Zulu. I never will be a Zulu. I can't run like an Olympic runner from Africa, and we're all different. Why can't we be with our common culture and respect others? Why are they trying to dissolve our culture? And this is the point. Why are they doing it? I mean,
because
Japanese come first. Nobody else. Everybody else comes second.
Okay, so basically, the Bill of Rights. We quote the Bill of Rights. So let's have a look at the Bill of Rights of 1689. What this actually means. So break down the Bill of Rights, and I do declare that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state, or potentate hath nor ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence, authority, ecclesiastical, or spiritual within this realm. Prelate, high-ranking member of bishop, body of people, commonwealth, sovereignty, kingdom, dukedom, monarchy, superpower, world power, potentate, powerful, strong, virile. So nobody should be marrying a foreigner. That's the reason why we sank the Spanish Armada. Some of the Spanish populated Scotland during the sinking of the ship, as it happens. Jurisdiction. The right, power, authority higher than another in rank, nature, or kind. So we are all equal. Preeminence, dominant, superiority, distinction, perfection, supremacy. Authority, power to determine. Ecclesiastical, church or clergy, established institution. Spiritual, religious nature, spiritualistic, supernatural. Nobody can bully us, basically, and take our country. We have the right to defend our country.
We do. And I believe that I think that Westminster is rotten to the core. I think the whole system is rotten to the core. And the only way, as I see it, and I could be totally wrong, is it needs somebody to come up like a phoenix from the ashes and form a government away from Westminster that everybody supports. But they've got to answer two questions, and that is, one, who finances them, and two, if they mention nothing about usury, because that should be the two things: destroy usury and be very open about who finances them. And then if they are actually going on the mainstream, then you'll have no time for them, because the mainstream will only court those for the agenda. So whenever I see anybody going on the mainstream, I think, oh, no, they're rubbish, because the mainstream, anybody that's speaking truth will not get on there. The only place they'll get on there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a local BBC radio program where hardly anybody's listening.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've just been contacted by one of my colleagues, and she said, Caroline, she said, she's very concerned about the LGBT agenda being promoted through the primary school system. And she wanted me to find a teacher who would be prepared to stand up and be counted and talk against this agenda. I said, you must be joking. I'm not going to find a teacher who is currently teaching to actually put their head above the parapet, because it's effectively like whistleblowing. You're actually disrespecting your employer, I guess that's how they would see it, and you would be suspended forthwith, and then you maybe be pensioned off, and that's how, you'd be sent on garden leave. They couldn't possibly have you with your own ideas stood in front of the classroom after that.
Well, what gets me is all about this LG, lesbian and gays and things like that. They are an incredibly small percentage in society, very small. Because if they weren't a small percentage, we wouldn't be here. Because if that was normal, let's face it, civilization would have ended thousands of years ago. And they're pushing these minority groups as if they're hard done by, etc., etc. But Swinderby here has put a very interesting comment. He says, yes, this has been hashed over for years. We know who is behind all the mass migration into Europe, and we know why they're doing it. Why you're not discussing the
Zionist agenda? My gosh, where do we start? Well, let's have a look at the UN Agenda 2030, because that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about possibly burning Australia to a frazzle, dare I say. And so they're engineering the weather. We're having a very strange weather in Spain. We're having, notification of the East Coast erosion. Well, that's been happening for years, and the government has deemed it not an important area to spend taxpayers' money on shoring up the coastline. So that has been happening for years, and that's due to our government. So we've got Australia, and there's so much evidence now that it's not, if it is climate change, it is not just climate change. It's a much bigger agenda here, and they need land for building a high-speed train like we're having built in our country. So they want people moving into these smart cities. Well, this is what's happening in the UK. You've got the House of Lords moving possibly to York. And people say, oh, isn't that great? We're, the North has been underrepresented so long. Well, hang on. How does that actually work? Because every area, it's a constituency in the North is the same as a constituency in the South. It's supposed to be done on the same basis. So the country is split. Forget about Scotland, because that's different altogether. But the amount of population per constituency, it's all supposed to have been spread out in a certain way. So the North should be as well represented as the South. Because our media predominantly do their shows from London, then they will have that Westminster bubble feel to their output. But the North is, in fact, to be honest, some of the cities like Manchester and York and Leeds are very, very prosperous compared to other parts of the North. So the House of Lords moving up to York, what does that actually mean? Well, I don't know why they've chosen York. However, York used to be called Eboracum, and it was a very important city historically. And not only that, but you've got the Archbishop of York. Could it be to do with the fact that number 2 person in the Church of England is actually based in that city? It's got great train links on the East Coast line to London. That said, it's a prosperous place. It's very cultural, lots of theatres and so forth. But you would have to ask the powers that be why they chose York. But devolution, this is actually dividing us because in the fullness of time, we will all have these metro mayors. Metro seems to be the in word. It's metrosexual. It's metropolitan. The new metro man.
Yeah, but you've forgotten to say you've got to be sustainable, haven't they? They've got to be sustainable mayors.
So you've already got Andy Burnham in Manchester. He's a metro mayor, and they will ultimately have lots and lots of power. So with under this northern powerhouse, under George Osborne, who's been in place for a considerable time as the chief executive. Remember, you look at a lot of these websites, these are not government bodies, but it's engineered that they are given time to give advice to the government. So it's all jobs for the boys.
Well, that's right. As Yuri Bezmenov quite rightly said in the 1980s, that you're going to have lots of societies and people like that advising, in inverted commas, the government, who are not democratic, nobody voted for them, and they're just faceless wonders. But I'd like to actually answer go back to Swinderby, thank you very much, what he said about I won't say the word Z agenda. Well, if you, as I'm sure that Swinderby knows, I know, you know, and a lot of people are aware of, the people that, should we say, the people who are not allowed to criticise, I think that's the best way of not getting booted off of YouTube, were behind the Soviet Union and Mao's China, because they were both financed from Wall Street. And there is evidence that the EU is financed from Wall Street. And both the other dictators, dictatorships, Soviet Union and Mao's China, led to mass genocide. And what we're heading towards, Agenda 2030, mass genocide. I think that's something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I was in Bath today, and they've gone one step further. They're beyond 5G now. They're talking about another frequency, if you like, and undoubtedly we are the guinea pigs for the rollout of 5G, and it has already been rolled out in many areas. Now, as things stand at the moment, yes, some people will be getting headaches, some people may be getting nosebleeds. We're all different. I think legally, we can all be classed as different individuals with our different ailments, if you like, and weaknesses. But as time progresses, they can change that frequency and they can up the frequency. So you can't, so this is where they get you, because nothing is set in tablets of stone. And they've got this wiggle room, if you like, and we will never know necessarily what frequency they're actually aiming to use on us at any particular time. So where do we go from here? 5G is not the only matter we've got to consider. You look in Australia, it's not 5G that's killed 1 million animals. It's not 5G necessarily that has killed, had a large part to play. So, you know, if we, in Australia as well, this is a good point, that they have got their water privatized. Yes. You put our food and our water and our housing, our shelter in the hands of the global elites, the corporatocracy, then you have no control whatsoever.
That's right. That's right. Well, when you vote, you're handing over your, shall we say, your life over to a complete and utter stranger. I mean, this is for another program, but I'm actually looking into, do we really need government? But again, that's for another program. I think that's such a heavy subject. But when you look at it, government is extremely dangerous, because look how many people are being killed by government. And you notice that things like health service, roads and things like that, things where they have to provide a service, was cutbacks, but things where they take money from you, like speed highway robbery cameras and things like that, super efficient, aren't they? I mean, the Inland Revenue, you think how efficient they are. It's breathtaking how efficient. So why can't we switch that round, so that the efficiency can be moved into the health service and the roads? And then to pay tax, you say, well, there's a waiting list. You can't pay your tax until about 3 years' time. Sorry about that, because we've got cutbacks. No, they won't do that. But you notice that taking from you is always efficient, giving any little bit of, shall we say, offal back to you. Oh, no, we've got cutbacks. We can't do this, can't do that. And it's by design. It's done like that deliberately.
But the trouble is, we have, Chris, we just have now so much corruption. As soon as you start digging, you've got James Staley. He's the chief executive of Barclays Bank PLC, and he's speaking at Davos. Now, James Staley's best friend, or one of his friends, was Epstein. And, he wasn't vetted before he was given that job at Barclays Bank by the House of Commons Select Committee. That is supposed to happen. We have put FOIAs in, and Mark Anthony Taylor's done that, and there was no such grilling. Yet it was reported in the papers that there would be a grilling. So you've got these situations. I was speaking to a mum a couple of days ago. She was telling me that one of her children had lied about being hit by her, and the child goes to court. The child admits then he lied because he just wanted his Xbox back. Now, the parents both have to go in separately. They both have to have their own solicitor. And what the solicitor says, because the children, despite all this, both children get removed from the family and get taken into foster care, even though there was no case to answer. And the judge said there was no case to answer. That's my understanding. And this happens time and time again. But the solicitor's advice to the parents is, you won't stand any chance of getting your children back. Just destroy your court papers and get on with your life. Now, I don't know whether you have any children, but for those mums and dads out there who are in a similar situation, or have children and think, oh, but for the grace of God, go I, then you have to say, why are we just sitting back and letting social services time and time again remove children on the grounds of potential future emotional distress in the family?
And why
there is too much interference, and that's all goes back to our birth certificates, registering our children within 28 days of their birth, and then of course we're actually physically handing our children, well, physically in the forms of paperwork to the state. So those people who have known about the importance of not registering because of this, they then get hounded, they get into trouble, they can go to prison. And it's funny actually, because I was thinking the other day, about prison. People who don't pay their TV license used to get sent potentially to prison. Do you remember? It was classed as a criminal offence. And why did we never question that? Why was it so important in the pecking order?
It's a contract, because I don't have a television. I haven't had one for 10 years. And every 2 years, I'll get this letter through the post telling me that they're going to do nasty things to me. As my situation changed, I still haven't got a television. And I don't give them any name. I just I'll get an old stamp, stick it on there, and just say I do not wish to enter into your contract, and then leave me alone for another 2 years. But again, council tax, a contract, we won't go into all this, but we're just being conned all the way through. And I'll sort of leave on this note, and this is about government. I once worked with a chap who was in Argentina in the 1990s when the economy went bust. And what people used to do, they used to get their pots and pans and at 1 o'clock every day, bash on the walls of the banks. And the police just turned a blind eye. But what this chap did say, now this is one isolated occasion, it's from one person and other people may know differently. But he said, because there was a breakdown, people paid, teachers were not getting paid, so they took private work in. And of course, the children got better educated in the 1990s because they didn't go into the school system. They got private teachers in. Also, people started to take care of their surroundings and cars didn't speed like they used to because they knew that it wasn't socially acceptable. And potholes started to get filled up because what people did, they went along, cut the chains in the council department, got all the materials and filled their own potholes up because they got fed up with it. And he said things started to work. Yes. And he said things started to work. And suddenly the World Bank thought, oh my God, people are realizing they don't need government. And they quickly gave Argentina a massive loan and all the usury rubbish. And then it went back to the old state. But he said the crime rate actually went down because people became more sort of shall we say, responsible for their own surroundings. They picked up litter. They didn't rely on the council. And, you think about it, people walk down the road and see litter and say, well, it's the council's job to pick that up. Whereas if there was no council, you'd think, oh, I better pick that up because it's not very nice, is it? And you look at a road intersection, if the traffic lights go wrong, there's chaos for a little while, and suddenly it sort of sorts itself out. You get a policeman on duty, and there's a massive traffic jam either way. And it seems that people tend to work things out for themselves much better than governments, but that's for another program.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was talking to people whose parents have died when they were young, and quite often, Auntie Doris would take them in, or Grandma Betty would take them in, and they tried as best they could to ensure that the children were kept within the family. But of course, all that's gone by the board now. You have grandparents pleading with social services saying, well, okay, so they may not be, fit. You do have the option of switching the channel over. I do not believe it's compulsory to stay here and listen. What's he talking?
What Monty?
Not on TV.
Yeah, Monty's all right. I think what he means, you don't have to sort of listen to the television. Well, I got rid of mine because I got fed up with the BBC and the mainstream media promoting an agenda that was alien to my thinking and was communist. So I thought, right, I don't really want to pay for communism to be blasted into my living room. So that was it. And I got rid of it and I've never missed it. And I advise other people to do the same because I think, why do you want to pay for the privilege of having that rubbish pumped into your living room? Because I came home one evening and I was absolutely worn out. I had a really tough day and I thought, I just want to be entertained. And I sat down and switched on the television and there's Channel 4 talking about people of, shall we say, an alternative sexual persuasion, what they get up to in lavatories. Well, as long as they leave me alone, if I call short, I couldn't give a damn what they get up to in lavatories. And providing it's between consenting adults, I don't want to know. I want to remain ignorant.
Well, maybe people need to be taught how to use a lavatory, because that just reminds me of something that was that I mentioned in one of my videos. Mark Anthony Taylor had been investigating this report that had been leaked from the Financial Conduct Authority, and apparently, according to the cleaners, the toilets have excrement on the walls, and these are people who are supposed to be investigating financial irregularities who cannot even use the toilet. So what has Great Britain come to?
Precisely.
And I was thinking, about rubbish. You're saying about how things have, we're talking about how things have changed. I was walking past this car park today, and there's lots of brambles around the car park, and there were tin cans, pizza boxes, and I just thought, doesn't this look so unsightly? But our councils have removed most litter bins now.
That's
So
right.
people just don't think about taking the litter home. They just discard it. So it's probably 50-50. People are getting more thoughtless and not really appreciating, their environment, and just discarding stuff. I mean, it's just not nice.
But it helps with the stress. I mean, I was talking to Mark last night, and what we was talking about is how people are being psychologically destroyed. And I don't want to repeat what I was talking about to Mark, but I would advise people, if you look at the latest Richard D. Hall video about new German medicine, that's really worth looking at. And I put 2 and 2 together, and I think they don't really need to herd people into camps. They don't need to have mass shootings or anything like that. All they have to do is psychologically destroy people, because if you depress people, I mean, you look at the amount of people on antidepressants now. You look at the way society is just literally falling to bits. Walk down to your local high street, you see how many people are obese, how many people don't really care about their appearance. They walk around and they're just, and that is exactly what they want. They want sheeple that will just watch Coronation Street or EastEnders or whatever the rubbish they want to.
It's Love Island is the #1 program.
Who?
Apparently. Apparently it was last year as well. So that's how people getting their kicks watching Love Island. And you've got now in our high street, the empty shops have been replaced by the vapor cigarette. Is that right? Vapor cigarettes. What's that say? The fabric of society. What did he say then? What did Monty say? The fabric of society has been eroded away each decade. Yeah, and he's 43. So yeah, it's that. So now all people aspire to is wanting 5G to use for their computer games. Is that what they think that the elites have devised 5G for?
Well, also, you try and tell people the truth. I mean, I know one person, you tell them the truth, they go, I don't want to know. I just don't want to know. We live in a lovely time now. They don't want to know the truth. And that is
It's a conspiracy. The truth is the conspiracy.
That's right.
Everything is turned on its head. But I think we'll probably have to cover this topic again, won't we?
You have to, but I'll end on this conspiracy theory, and it's between you and I. It's a real conspiracy. There's an actual terrible rumor going around that Prince Charles has a male friend that isn't a nonce. Now, I mean, that's a conspiracy, isn't it?
You're not going to name names.
I'm not going to name names.
Actually, you talk about the royal family. The royal family, Prince Charles, is talking about people with children. Prince Charles bought a property for disgraced Bishop Peter Ball of Gloucester, who was subject to a 2-part TV program last week about relations with young men. And Charles supported him, gave a testimony to a report, and bought the guy a house for him and his twin brother. And the only reason, I guess, why the TV program has been aired is because Peter Ball has now died. But I just think it's just truly shocking that we couldn't talk about Ted Heath while he was alive, but we can talk about him now while he's dead.
I can't accuse anybody, and least of all Prince Charles, because he's got the sort of money that could have got Stalin off. But so I'm not accusing him, because I only work on evidence, and that was just a joke what I said earlier. So allegedly, shall we say? But what gets me is, how does one person have so many friends, in inverted commas, and associates that are, shall we say, paedophiles? That on the law of averages, it just seems a bit creepy to me, and it does.
And to deny knowing that that's what they're doing.
Well, he must be either very, very naive, which I don't think he is, or there's something. I'll just keep an open mind, shall we say, but I just think there's something odd. And also, a couple of years ago on the news, just before Christmas, I think it was about 2014-13, they just announced on the radio that they found a body up a tree on the royal estate in Sandringham. And that was that, as if it was a common occurrence. Oh dear, look, there's a corpse over there up a tree. Now, if they found a corpse and a tree in your garden or my garden, I think the police would be all over you, all over everybody like a rash. So how comes it was just a sort of, oh, there's a corpse up a tree? How did it get there? Did someone kill themselves?
Well, on a lighter note, then I've just had an email from Canada today, and they're holding, I believe, a grand jury regarding sex abuse over in Canada. So, who that involves? Wait and see.
That will be
very. So, thank you very much for having me on your show, and let's do it again sometime.
Please come on again, and thank you very much for coming on here, Caroline. And we'll end on this note. Did you know the Queen owns Canada, and the Canadians only own 1 foot of soil above what she owns? So the Queen owns all of Canada, and they only own 1 foot of soil. And Justin Trudeau his daddy may not be Pierre Trudeau. It may be Fidel Castro, and I'll leave on that note. Thank you.
Well, I'm Caroline Stevens, seeking the truth, and please subscribe to my video channel.
And please subscribe to Eric Von Essex channel, and I'll be on at 7 o'clock tonight with Mark Windows. So, please go and have a cup of tea and come back and join us. And I do apologise if I haven't been posting up your comments from the chat room. I try to, but I'm human witnesses. And thank you very much, everybody in the chat room, and Caroline for joining us. And join us again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.